So, on one night, I was feeling extremely bored. I was letting my phone charge, and I was looking for something to watch, since I got Tubi and there were many choices to choose from. And the choice that I decided to go for was the French animated series that goes by the name of Zig and Sharko. And considering the fact that this show takes place on the beach, I think that it fits with the summer feeling, since I started watching the show in June of 2023. But I'm going to do something a little different today, in that I'm going to be dedicating this review to two shows. On one part of this review, I'll be dedicating to Zig and Sharko, while the other, I'm dedicating to the spin-off, The Adventures of Bernie. Since the Zig and Sharko half isn't going to take too long, and I have quite a few things to say about The Adventures of Bernie, I'm making this a double review for you guys. I know that I technically did this back during my Eek the Cat review, where that was also a triple review, since Eek shared its time slot with two other shows. Zig and Sharko and The Adventures of Bernie, from my knowledge, didn't share the same time slot, but they are part of the same franchise, and this is being done so that way I don't have to do a separate Sean's Thoughts or Network Reviews episode on that show in particular.
Under the sea, under the sea.
Let's start off with Zig and Sharko first, since that show came out first, obviously. And to start off this review, here's a good question for you guys. Besides the writing and the comedy, what makes a series? If you said the characters, then you are absolutely correct. To quote Alex Hirsch, it's all about the characters. Regardless of how your series looks, regardless of its high concept, regardless of its celebrity voices or budget or whatever, all of that is secondary to your characters. Are they funny? Do they have personalities that pop and are memorable and are interesting next to each other? And well, this particular statement from Alex Hirsch is completely true in this case. What makes me say that Zig and Sharko is a good show is its characters. The characters themselves actually save the show in the long run, because to get all of the issues with this show out of the way, one of the biggest issues that I have with Zig and Sharko is its humor. The humor in Zig and Sharko isn't very funny, to be honest. It's just kind of there. And they aren't very effective, since the show repeats the exact same jokes over and over again, with little variation to it. Comparing this show to Tom and Jerry real quick, what makes those shorts funny to this day is the variation to it. The jokes that Tom and Jerry tells isn't just, lol, it's a cat getting hurt by a mouse. They actually go through a ton of creative ways of how they do their other slapstick, while with Zig and Sharko, it mostly involves Sharko hitting Zig whenever he so much as lays his hands on Marina, and that's basically it. And not only that, but this show can get pretty repetitive at times, similarly to Code Lyoko,
which coincidentally is also a French show.
This show's repetitive nature was shown the most in Season 1.
Just like Code Lyoko.
I mean, the animation in Season 1 is still good,
having this Ren and Stimpy feeling to it.
Even if I do prefer the look of Seasons 2 and 3, since it's much more colorful and makes the characters look more cute, to the point where I was thinking to myself that maybe they should vary it up a little bit. They do have some episodes that are set in other locations. There's even one episode that is set in a city far away from the island, but at every other point, Season 1 is mostly set near a rock that Marina sits on, with Zig on the edge of the island with Bernie, as he thinks of ways to try and get to her without Sharko beating him up. And these particular episodes are indistinguishable enough to the point where episodes are kind of hard to recognize, since what we see is set up in the exact same way every single time. Heck, there aren't even any location changes, unlike Tom and Jerry or Code Lyoko, as well as Nightmare Ned or Kappa Mikey. Getting up to the point where there are even some episodes that reuses the exact same animation of a guy who crashes his boat into the sand of the island due to blurry vision and gets angry to the point where he jumps off the boat into a raft and goes away. Seasons 2 and 3 do make improvements to this, as for one thing, it's no longer just Zig going forward into the water to try and catch Marina while Sharko guards her. The characters are actually outside of the water now and are exploring more than just the water. Though yes, I would honestly like if they decided to go ahead and mix it up a little bit at some point. Have some episodes that are set on the beach, one underwater, and another where the characters travel to somewhere different, because another issue that I have with this show is that it feels very limited, which is a similar feeling that I have with Chibiverse, which is also very limited in regards to what it's trying to go for as a successor to House of Mouse, as each season of this show so far has a theme to it. Season 1 is mostly set underwater, Season 2 is set on the beach, and Season 3 is set on a cruise ship. Although, when you have every episode of a season sticking to the exact same location over and over again, it does make it become very tiring. Seasons 2 and 3 aren't as bad with this as Season 1, as they at least spend certain episodes on other parts of the island, or somewhere that the cruise ship goes, but I do believe that some variety would make things better. Some characters in this show, for example, have not even appeared since Season 1, but given that this show is on hiatus at the moment, there is plenty of room for improvement and ways that they could implement Season 1 characters into future episodes. SpongeBob SquarePants, for instance, is a show that for the longest time basically ignored a majority of its background characters, most notably with Bubble Bass, but recently, they brought him back and basically made him that show's nerd character that is kind of the rival to Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob and Patrick to an extent, and that show has been continuing to do this ever since seasons 9, 10, and 11, and well, when it comes to Zig and Sharko, we hardly if ever see what's underwater in seasons 2 and 3, and when we do, those sequences are very short. However, in spite of the fact that this show does have its issues, the thing that does save this show from being average, in the same vein as either the clutter segments from Meek the Cat or Power Players, is actually the characters, which comes full circle with what I mentioned a little bit ago. That being the fact that the characters can make a show good in spite of the other aspects being lackluster. Similarly to Puka, even though the characters don't talk at all in this series, you get what their characters are like from how they are animated on screen. And the series is also better off without any dialogue at all. Sharko is the strong and aggressive, but lovable shark who protects Marina by any means necessary. Zig is the hungry hyena who wants to eat Marina, and goes through many schemes to try and capture her and eat her. Marina is the mermaid who is sweet and naive. Bernie is the genius who sets up the plans for Zig to try and eat her. I could go on. Something that I find very clever about this series too, is that nobody talks, not even the characters who you'd think would talk. Rarely if ever do the characters even say anything throughout the series. Where Tom and Jerry and Puka did have two characters, namely Tom, Jerry, Puka, and Guru, who don't talk at all in those shows/shorts. Nobody talks in Zig and Sharko. Not even the few human characters that we do see, including Marina,
even though she's a mermaid.
But this honestly does make this show easier to watch in the long run, in case the show's future episodes end up being hard to find in English, so whether the show is in French or whatever, this show won't be hard to watch at all. One standout character that I do want to talk about in this series is Sharko's girlfriend, Marina. She's definitely my favorite character in this show, and definitely one of my new favorite characters of all time. Not only is she absolutely adorable, with sounds and giggles that are just as cute, but she's also a character that ended up surprising me while watching each episode of the show. Because at first, Marina is one of those characters that you could describe as the damsel in distress, similar to other damsel in distress characters like April O'Neil from the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or Princess Peach from Mario.
Barring the one from the 2023 movie, she's awesome, and Bowser's song about her is awesome as well.
Where Marina always gets captured by Zig and is about to be swallowed by him, while being naive towards what's happening to her. But at the exact same time, she's a character who defies a damsel in distress. Normally with damsel in distress characters, they're often one of two things. They're either characters that end up getting captured by the villain and the hero goes and saves them, or characters that try to subvert this trope but ends up having them get captured anyway. Marina is a way to do this trope well, because when she isn't in need of help from Sharko,
given that she hardly pays attention to her surroundings,
there are many points in this series where she can stand up for herself when someone else gets in her way, or when Sharko gets blamed for something that Zig made happen, and she also doesn't let anyone else walk all over her, as there are points where she does get irritated when either Sharko does something to her, or when someone else annoys her. And when it comes to the relationship between her and Sharko, that too is very wholesome and sweet, and gives this show enough charm to be able to watch multiple episodes of without without feeling bored. Though, I absolutely recommend skipping over the episode Manic Mermaid, for the obvious reason being that it makes Sharko become way out of character, and I do feel a little indifferent about Zig and Bernie's portions in the series, as Zig's whole shtick of trying to eat Marina gets predictable fast, but Sharko and Marina are the two characters that kept me watching the show, and while not as adorable as Marina's sounds or giggles, this show has many moments where it actually makes me feel sorry for Sharko, as puppy dog sounds play over him whenever he's feeling sad when accidentally hurting Marina, and that's quite an accomplishment that the show is able to do, because sharks are normally absolutely terrifying, given that I actually had a dream once where it was this found footage video similar to that Paris Catacombs one, which was about a guy who got lost in a water park because of two anthropomorphic sharks who were ready to eat them at the end of that video. Now, you guys might be wondering, why did I decide to go ahead and do a Sean's Thoughts video on this show, rather than a Sean's Network Reviews episode? Well, that's pretty simple actually. In spite of the fact that this show came out in 2010, this show is actually still going on to this very day. But unlike, say, The Simpsons, South Park, SpongeBob, and Family Guy, this show only has 3 seasons so far, with only 78 episodes. That's because this show takes multiple hiatuses in between. The first hiatus that this show took, by the way, was between June 14th, 2011 and February 15th, 2016. Just wow. And people thought that Johnny Bravo and Steven Universe took long hiatuses. And between seasons 2 and 3, that hiatus took 3 years. And the show is on hiatus at the moment. The 4th season, on the other hand, came out in 2024, but I've yet to have watched any episode yet. But apparently, the 4th season is about Marina getting legs.
Though this was already done in a season 1 episode, and she felt absolutely miserable in that episode with getting legs.
And I haven't been keeping up with any of the words about the show in 2024, but I've been hearing that season 4 isn't good, but I'll make that judgment on if it's good or not when I get around to it for myself. Because like I said, I make the judgments on what I think of shows and movies on my own, not through what someone else thinks about it. Zig and Sharko is definitely not at the top of the Sean's Network Reviews ranking. It's not as good as either Puka or OKK Let's Be Heroes, because they have great characters and great comedy. Heck, I'd even say that Kappa Mikey is better, given that it's funnier. But it's a show that I enjoyed watching so far. But like Camp Coral, these are my thoughts at the moment. The show may get better or worse, but I do wish this show the best of luck for what it has in store in the future.
Is this some kind of cruel joke?
Now, The Adventures of Bernie, on the other hand, is a showcase that, even though I didn't have much to say about Zig and Sharko, it could have been so much worse. Case in point, The Adventures of Bernie. Now, since this was a part of the exact same franchise, and KawaiiLifeAntonio reminded me that Bernie from Zig and Sharko got his own spin-off,
Which I knew from the start.
I decided to give this particular show a chance, to see how it both stacks up to the predecessor and how it stands on its own. And I gotta say, The Adventures of Bernie is pretty dang bad. Like, not the absolute worst show I reviewed so far. This show is still better than the Tom and Jerry comedy show, Robot Boy, and Thundercats Roar, because those shows are worse written, more annoying, and far more anger-inducing in the case of Robot Boy and Thundercats Roar. But oh man, The Adventures of Bernie is pretty close to being there. What's the issue that I have with The Adventures of Bernie? Well, do you remember Planet Sheen, which basically took the comic relief Sheen and decided to launch him into space and put him as the status of being the main character, but while he's in space, he doesn't care a single bit about getting home, but Nesbeth does? Well, that's exactly what this show reminds me of. Except two of the differences that this show makes from Planet Sheen is that instead of taking a comic relief and leaving him stranded out in space, this show decides to take the partner of Sharko's enemy, Zig, named Bernie, and leave him stranded out in the ocean, far away from the island, and this time, Bernie is actually concerned about getting home, but the universe always tells him no.
Don't worry, I'll be getting to this problem in just a little bit.
Although, just like Planet Sheen, this show does have a major problem as a spin-off of the predecessor series, where there are aspects of the original series that you'd be wondering about while watching it. In Planet Sheen, it doesn't answer why Sheen's friends and family from Jimmy Neutron didn't end up getting worried sick about where Sheen went, and it also doesn't answer why Jimmy didn't go out looking for Sheen, despite the fact that he could easily locate him in space. This series, on the other hand, doesn't answer the question as to why Zig doesn't attempt to go out looking for Bernie, given that the original series had an episode where Zig actively freaks out when Bernie went missing. But this series completely sweeps this under the rug, and the characters from the previous series are indeed aware that Bernie got stranded out in the middle of the ocean, and yet the questions still remain unanswered. So this show already fails as a spin-off to the original series. But that is honestly the least of this show's problems. The real issue with this show is the characters. What made the original Zig and Sharko series so good was that there was a specific comfort value behind it, where in spite of the fact that the show's concept was pretty horrifying, the characters were able to make the series have a lighthearted feeling to leave you with a good feeling afterward. The Adventures of Bernie, on the other hand, does the exact opposite, where the idea of this spin-off is legitimately upsetting, on top of the fact that this is the type of series that I would strongly not advise you watch if you're in a bad mood, because this series is legitimately frustrating, with almost every single new character that they introduced being annoying or awful for one reason or the other. As I stated in my reviews on Monster Family and Ollie's Pack, I don't mind it when shows get a little mean here and there. It's when they end up having nothing else to support it is when I ended up having an issue with it. And The Adventures of Bernie is a good example of this. Unlike Planet Sheen, where people have said that Sheen works but only in small doses, I don't know what people's general opinions are on Bernie, but I can say that while I don't think that he was anything special in the original series, he worked as a good second-in-command to Zig. If you guys were a fan of Bernie, then I'm sure that you guys will not like this show either, because this series' main purpose is to beat down on Bernie and emotionally manipulate him as much as possible. And by the way, when I say that this series tortures Bernie as much as possible, I actually do mean it. And this isn't even a one-time thing. No. Literally almost every single episode is like this, where Zig and Sharko had the issue where they constantly repeated the exact same joke, or Sharko hurts Zig for getting close to Marina. This show has the issue where it constantly gives Bernie a chance to go home, only for it to be taken away from him, due to some emotionally manipulative thing that make him ruin his chance to get back home, due to plot contrivances, and this show really doesn't want Bernie to get home, which is another thing that this show repeats over and over again. Literally almost every single episode involves another character annoying Bernie to death, then expecting the audience to feel sorry for them at the last second. Or even worse, said character can be as stupid as a brick towards his own feelings, or when he literally gets captured in a net in one episode, to a point where he either snaps or accepts his fate. If there's one show that I could actually describe as a series where the main character is put through torment, it's definitely this show right here. I've seen quite a few people who have said that shows like Eek the Cat or Nightmare Ned only exist to put the main characters through torture, to the point where some people, no joke, compared them to Stressed Eric, when that's not actually true in the context of the episodes. In fact, Eek the Cat did often give Eek a happy ending at the end of said episode, and stopped focusing on Eek torture in later seasons. And Nightmare Ned only puts Ned through his nightmares as a motivational tool to have him overcome his fear, and he does often have a happy ending. The Adventures of Bernie does not do any of these things. And no, I don't count Bernie doing a good deed for others as a happy ending, because it feels more like a way to guilt trip him into sacrificing his chances of going home when that's all he wants to do. Is the show trying to imply that he's selfish for doing so? What would he even miss if he eventually got home and left these new characters behind? Because let me just say this right now. What makes this show worse than the predecessor series is that almost none of the new characters that they introduced in this show are likable in the slightest. either being annoying or just straight up anger-inducing, which just rubs salt all over an open wound for this series with all of the other issues that I had so far. Admittedly, as you've already heard me say, Zig and Sharko's humor has never been its strongest aspect, but it had the warmth and comfortness for the characters to soften it. The opposite could apply with other shows as well, where Johnny Bravo and Ed, Edd n Eddy were mean-spirited shows, but had the humor to back them up. This show has neither to back it up, because literally all the jokes in this show revolve around Bernie suffering for little to no reason. And I hate nearly every single new character that they introduced into this show. I'm glad that these new characters don't talk, just like with every other character in this franchise, because these new characters are already annoying enough when they don't talk. The only characters in this show that I find somewhat tolerable are that fancy-looking hermit crab named Georges, although they made him sound way too whiny in this show, and his whiny sounds make him sound female, which is why I thought he was a female at first. Though that's mainly because he's one of the only characters in this show that is actually nice to Bernie and doesn't prevent him from going home, except for one episode. And there's also that diving woman named Barbara, although she was incredibly dense in that one episode where Bernie was trying to emphasize the fact that he wanted to go home, but blissfully glossed over that in what seems to be on purpose. Every other character's sole purpose in this show seems to be that it's trying to prevent Bernie from returning to the island, and once again, shows emotional manipulation when he dares to fight back against them or say no. And yet, this show tries to portray them as friends for some reason, when, I'm sorry, a friend does not steal from you or continually try to attack you when rightfully trying to reclaim it from them. Truck Kraken in particular. His one gimmick in this show is that he steals things from others, then when they want the thing he stole back, he begins to attack them for wanting said thing back from them. According to the Zig and Sharko wiki, he's supposed to be an antagonist for Bernie to fight against, which is fair. It does at least give him more of an excuse for why he's somewhat unlikable.
Unlike Gus from Robot Boy or Galileo from Power Players.
But like Master Frown from Unikitty, that doesn't inherently make what he does in most of these episodes acceptable in the slightest. He still gets bad enough to the point where he makes me want all squids to go extinct. It started off rather harmless, with Kraken stealing Bernie's remote control for his rocket, nothing out of the ordinary. Then when we get to the episode The Shell Thief, where Kraken literally steals Bernie and Georges' shells.
To hermit crabs, a shell is like their clothes, and without their shell, they are pretty much naked.
This is where I drew the line. Kraken's actions in this episode are so unacceptable, it makes you wonder why none of the other fish creatures reported him to the underwater police or Poseidon yet. And in another episode, it's also revealed that Marina's starfish,
which is his girlfriend,
has been writing letters to Bernie for what had presumably been months. And this squid right here has been swiping her letters and keeping them as far away and hidden from Bernie as much as possible. Not to mention, he also takes advantage of Bernie in another episode by having him do his chores while he's literally sweating his butt off, and he basically lets Kraken cool off with him when he decides to sacrifice going home again for the billionth time. Why? He literally took advantage of you, not even letting you cool off with the fan for more than a few seconds. Kraken doesn't deserve to have an ending like this. But yeah, if I hadn't made it clear by the tone of the Adventures of Bernie section of this video, I really don't like this show. I'd go so far as to say that this is one of the worst shows that I reviewed so far. Not just in Sean's thoughts, but also Sean's network reviews. Not quite as bad as either Thundercats Roar, Robot Boy, Tom and Jerry Comedy Show, or even Ollie's Pack. Because the animation in this show is at least passable and visually interesting. There's no writing issues that are obvious enough that casual viewers would notice. There's no issues with the background music or sound effects, and it's not quite as annoying or frustrating as those other shows. Especially since the characters don't talk,
even if they are annoying in other ways.
But it is quite up there with those other 4 shows, I guarantee it. Yes, I am sure that there are definitely worse shows coming up for Sean's network reviews that I just didn't get around to binge watching yet, but given some of the others that it's competing against, That's really saying something. As horrible as the series finale of Middle School Moguls was, I could give that show some credit that not every single episode was like that finale. And the Gene Deitch Tom and Jerry shorts at least had some gems if you look hard enough, and that it didn't have every single episode include pet abuse or Clint Clobber's horrible actions. The Adventures of Bernie is exactly that, where almost every single episode has the exact same problem as the last. And it's basically the show that I would describe as the opposite of Zig and Sharko, where that show had enough warmth and comfortness to put you in a good mood. This show is just upsetting and unpleasant, and I would not recommend watching this show if you're in a bad mood. So, for recommendations, just stick with Zig and Sharko. There's enough episodes in the 3 seasons of that series available to hold you over until you watch season 4, because even though it's not funny, it's a feel-good kind of series thanks to its characters. However, please by all means necessary, stay away from the Adventures of Bernie. It's unpleasant, unfunny, obnoxious, and is the type of series to watch if you want to put yourself in a bad mood.
Everything